talk very quickly about this ultra thin MacBook. Certainly, I don't think anything crazy revolutionary, but it has a few interesting things that I think are telling for the industry, most notably USB-C. But Jeffrey Campman, tell us about it.
Okay, so Apple was already well known for the MacBook Air, which it's the super thin, super light notebook. But they found ways to make it thinner, and they reintroduced this thing as just like the regular MacBook with no suffix. Like a while back, like around 2004, 2006, there was a white MacBook and a black MacBook, and they were
Right,
plastic and they were
right.
midline things. And now, so I mean, this isn't in that same position though, I don't think. So this thing is only 13.1 millimeters thick. That's 25% thinner than the current Air, which is again, that's already super impressive.
Yeah.
Just from a thinness engineering perspective, I guess. And it only weighs 2 pounds. And how they got there was they miniaturized a whole bunch of things. They miniaturized the motherboard. They made it like 67% smaller than the motherboard in the existing MacBook Air. They made the keyboard a lot thinner. They introduced a new switch mechanism that allowed them to make a thinner keyboard. Um, and they also did away with the like mechanical touchpad. So now the touchpad in the MacBook Air is like this force feedback haptic kind of thing. It seems like it's based on some of the technology in the Apple Watch.
Right.
So it does artificial clicks, and it's also pressure sensitive too. But we'll get to that in a minute. Um, and so maybe the biggest thing for people who were like clamoring for a Retina display in the MacBook Air for the longest time. They finally put a Retina display in a notebook of this size. So it's a 12 point, I think it's just 12-inch display, and it's 2,304 by 1440.
Right.
So, and it's less. I think they said the display assembly is less than a millimeter thick, which is just nuts. But
Yeah. Apparently, it's almost a little bit creepy to hold because you don't feel like you're holding anything. It just
yeah,
doesn't.
It's 2 pounds,
Two
yeah, two
pounds.
pounds.
and the what they did was they used a Broadwell chip, which is the fifth
Right.
generation Intel Core
The
14
Core
nanometer.
M
Right, right,
specifically.
right. Which is and it's like a 5 watt chip, so it's fanless. So one reason it can be really thin is they don't have
Right.
to have active cooling,
Right.
and so then they have like this little like teeny motherboard, and the rest of the internal space is battery, and they
Yeah.
use these new batteries that are like layered.
Yeah,
Um,
they could make terraced batteries now, so they could fit, more battery into the same space, I think.
yeah, and so they've got basically like not much else inside of the thing from based on
Yeah.
their diagrams than just a lot of battery. And when I first saw this as being introduced, I was thinking, "Oh no, battery life! Oh no, battery life!" And then they get to this part and they're saying like 9 to 10 hours,
Yeah.
which at that point then I'm no longer objecting. I was worried because honestly, I don't care if it's any thinner than the last MacBook Air or maybe even thicker than that is okay. Like weight matters to me, um, but not thickness, right? Um,
Right.
but they seem to have put the right combination of things in it to where it's hard to object, right? Um, maybe
Well,
even
and
thicker with more battery life would be better, right, Jeff? Right? I
well,
think that
I have an Air
Or
for work.
like other ports.
that's that. Yeah, they got
You know,
one. It's weird because they got one USB-C port, and it's like this ultra great port because it does all your charging, USB, display port, everything. But you got one output, and you're gonna have to split off of that and use dongles and stuff
yeah.
to do everything. So I haven't got a clear sense of if I decide I want to like dock this, um,
Yeah.
and I want
Yeah.
to have a display off of it and say like a SD card reader and charge and like several external hard drive like how does that look? Does it really work with just one port? And to some extent I think they're going to try to get around that with, well, you put your storage on Wi-Fi or you put it on Bluetooth or they're trying to do that. And the whole super wireless thing is, I think Intel's going to push on that in the Skylake generation. I think we'll see this in PC laptops too going forward. Um, but it's still a little bit hard to say one port is like okay and I'm reconciled to that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. object, and Jeff, we'll let you go here in a second, but I think that I'm a little confused about how you're able to charge it and run a USB drive off at the same time. What I will say is that the general consensus that I've seen certainly seems to be that USB-C is a very compelling standard. It can provide power to mobile devices. It can provide both video and data transfer. It's a 10 was it gigabytes per second? So it's or gigabits. So it's extraordinarily high speed. So there is certainly, and it's reversible. It doesn't have the MagSafe features that I think people enjoy, but it's an interesting approach.
Right. I think this laptop tops out at 5 gigabits. I read that somewhere, that it's not actually full USB 3.
Okay.
speed.
Well, either way,
but I mean that's
wait. So it's slower than USB 3?
No.
Well, there's USB 3 and there's USB 3.1.
Which is
okay.
faster.
Yeah, the USB 3.1 is faster, but Type-C ports can be used with the 3.0 and 3.1 standards, as I found out today. So
you're just doing all the research.
He's writing news and getting abused by an editor.
Yeah.
or by a gerbil, by a commenter. Yeah. So anyway, but Jordan,
excuse me, I just think you should be aware that it's actually 5 gigabytes per second. So I don't know who you think you are, Mr. Cameron, but like you need to get your like I'm just so offended you wouldn't know that. Like, don't
I'm
you
gonna
know?
imagine all future comments in that voice, and
That's
it will
exactly
please
the
me
right
immensely.
Scott, you're a keyboard snob. What is? I mean, you haven't obviously played with it yet, but what's your reaction to this butterfly design?
So the butterfly mech is an evolution of the scissor style mechanism, which Apple is comparing to and saying, "Oh, the scissor mechanism isn't great," and etc. You know what? I think most laptops now, they just switch to rubber domes. They don't even use the scissors to like give a little bit of snap to the key when it goes down. And so Apple's comparing to their old MacBooks really more than they are to like the average laptop there. And the old MacBooks had a better keyboard than the average laptop. The butterfly mechanism is neat because if it works like they say, then scissor switches they rock a little bit side to side. They're not quite as stable as they should be. And I think the other reason they changed the design, if you look at it, is it so it can be thinner.
Yeah.
And so I like the extra stability. I hope that it has a good snap to it when it goes down. It looks like it's based on this tension of this plastic thing here that's going to like give when it goes. And I really don't know how that's going to feel. The other thing is I think there'll be less travel.
Yeah, that was one of the complaints that people had, was that this new keyboard, they said it feels really weird to type on because the travel is so short.
Yeah. And Chuck Hill in the comments says, didn't Synaptics have a switch design that pushed on the diagonal to give the illusion of longer key travel? Yes, they did. This is different than that, but it's weird how much Synaptics between their force pad that they demoed to us and that keyboard, and Jeff, you visited him and wrote that up. It's weird how much that type of stuff wound up in this before like Synaptics stuff wound up in PC laptops. I bet if you're Synaptics now, you can go to the PC guys and be like, "Hey, you should buy our stuff because you got to compete with them, right?"
Yeah, and the force pad stuff is actually pretty cool. I mean, Synaptics was demoing that in 2012, I think. And it's really it's kind of weird to see feedback when you push down harder and it just tracks perfectly with it. And given the sort of limitations of using a touchpad, having that force sensitivity is really neat. And it was supposed to be included, I think, in the Broadwell reference design that Intel came up with, but I don't know if that ever actually happened. But I imagine that, Synaptics is probably getting some calls now. They also have a really neat keyboard technology where it's actually magnetic that allows them they use magnetic resistance. So I don't know if we'll see that in slimmer designs. But this is kind of a case where, forget about it, they may not have sacrificed thickness for battery life, and the battery life may be good enough, but if you're compromising the keyboard again to do it, and this isn't even the thinnest Core M system around, like you've got Asus's, I think it's the
Zenbook
UX305,
UX305, yeah,
which is thinner, available with a higher resolution screen, has 3 USB ports and an SD reader. It's one of those, they won't sell nearly as well as a Mac will, but it's kind of interesting that they set out to do a really thin design and didn't even come up with the thinnest. Oh, I'm sure it's not anywhere close to the.
because I'm just trying to figure out what the compromise is, because that seems like so much more, but it's unclear to me exactly how they pulled that off.
It's saying it's
But
got
anyway.
a 45 watt hour battery, which is, it's a Core M too, so a lot of your savings are coming from the processor. But sort
Right,
of depending on the screen that you've got, it's this also looks like it maybe has a more uniform thickness over the whole. It's not as much of a wedge shape as
Right.
the MacBook is, but just the fact that they were able to squeeze a reasonable number of ports. It's got a mini HDMI port in it in a thinner package, kind of highlights the design decisions that Apple continues to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say though, I got a 5-year-old laptop and I'm thinking about getting a new one, and I look at this and think it would be nice. I mean, super light. You take it to stuff to, press events
Do
and
you
stuff.
need
And
it to be lighter? Like the difference between 2 pounds and 2.5 pounds?
do I want it to be lighter is a different question, right? You wind up carrying a lot of junk on your back, going through trade shows, and you collect stuff in your bag through the day because people are like, "Here's a Titan X," and then you're like,
That
"Oh, I
stuff
gotta carry a
weighs
Titan
more
X."
than this stuff.
I know, but I mean, like everything matters. Every little bit counts, right? I kind of have tried to ditch the DSLR to trade shows and just use my phone, and like, it's really nice not to have to carry that around, right? And so I have no.
What Scott is trying to say is he's old.
I am.
And old
I'm old and
people don't like
frail. I
carrying
just
things.
can't. But no, I mean, look, I get a 3-pound laptop now, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of a computing device that's this elegant that does everything I want and is an upgrade in every way from what I have now. Which, frankly, like laptops haven't really been in a good place, especially PC laptops, for a while, and they're getting there. So, Jordan, I've been looking at the Dell XPS 13 as an interesting thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but it has
I
this
saw people talking
screen that
about
goes
it, yeah.
all the way to the edges. It's got a nice Ultrabook form factor. It's got a really big touchpad, a decent keyboard that's backlit. Like, Dell really seemed to have hit it out of the park with that. And I was thinking maybe I'll just get one of those because I've really found that my old laptop is now an issue. Like, I'm not doing as much work on the road as I would. Because I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like that's so. It's probably time for a new one. And I looked at the price on this MacBook when they announced it, and I was like, it's like what, $13.99 starting?
Or
$12.99. $12.99, so $1,300. And
I get you a deal. I get you like $50 off.
and it's like, it's got good spec for the starting thing. I don't need to upgrade from there. 8 gigs of RAM, like it's done, right? You can pay the entry price,
256 memory.
and you're 256 gig SSD. Like I'm good, I'm done. But I went and looked at the Dell, and you start going through their little config menu. It starts out way cheaper than this, and when you get done, and you're like, oh, but I want the good display. That's like, bang! It's like $100 less than this for the Dell with the same
Interesting.
spec.
When you finally get it to where it's sort of
Yeah.
equivocal.
Did you also add the
That's very
$80
interesting.
dongle to the MacBook though?
No, but I mean, the way I use my laptop now, the only thing I don't even know if I need anything actually for what I normally do. Like, I don't even, maybe an SD card reader, but I could just plug my camera in. So,
Well, you still need an adapter for the Type
With
C.
the $80 dongle. Yeah, no, it's great.
for the type, I guess you need a USB type. But any laptop that I buy now, I want Type C on it. Like, I'd rather pay for the adapter and get Type C. One of the disadvantages of the Dell is that it is not Type C, and so eventually I need adapters going the other way. So I would prefer that. So I'm actually looking at this as like that's an interesting option. And Jordan, I figure somebody needs to buy a Mac on the staff who isn't you, right?
I honestly, I feel that way. I'd say a couple of things, then we can move on. The first is that remember when the Air first came out, it was priced higher than most other things and was considered to be the sort of luxury accessory that would be bought. People were saying at the time, maybe it was just me, executives getting onto Learjets would be carrying the MacBook Air.
Right.
Not very fast, but super thin and super sexy and super statement, fashion statement. Now I think it's kind of replaced the MacBook as like the go-to Apple computer. I see so many of them around in the coffee shops and various places, the bar crawls and the pool halls and the down low places that I visit. And but I mean, so I have a MacBook Air for my most recent job. I was given a MacBook Air as part of my job, and I love it. I mean, I go I take it to trade shows. I bring it home with me. For the most part, it stays at the office, but it is super light and it really does its job well. And then when I'm at the office, I plug it into a larger monitor, so I get the larger resolution. Anyway, the point is the MacBook Air went from this sort of exclusive item to something that it starts a little around 1,000 depending which size you get, but has become sort of accepted as a great entry level mobile Mac. So this is clearly trying to be a little more of that premium item that's not quite like MacBook Air with Retina. They felt like they needed to make something that's a little more distinctive, so they decided let's redesign this whole thing around a much thinner body. It's not longer battery life, it's comparable battery life. So I think this is sort of back to like the product you take on the Learjet. Not that it's completely out of reach. To your point, Scott, it's comparable price-wise with other devices, but just that it comes in gold, it's going to look super distinctive, and it's going to be that sort of statement that's like, I have the lightest laptop out there, or at least one of them. And it's got Type-C, which is going to be sort of the newest and the most leading edge. So I think it's sort of that story continues to play through here, and I can see why it's of interest to you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take 10 grand and not buy the Apple Watch. I'm gonna buy 7.14 MacBooks, and
Nice.
I can just strap one on my wrist, and I'm sure you can get the time on it. So it's light enough. I figure 2 pounds. Like you can put that on your wrist and
Yeah.
Just make sure you get the gold one for that.
That's right. Yeah, you gotta get. Well, I'm gonna get one of each, right? Because it's 7.14 of them for the same price as the watch. So,
Scott, I appreciate you trying, but the comedy on this podcast is kind of my thing.
oh, I'm sorry.
So if you could just
That explains it.
I love that you try. I love that you tried. I do. I love it. You're so enthusiastic, but if you just kind of just back off.